leave the country and stay there for about 6 months to a year, you come back, you also lose your way. Right. And just as a trivia, do you know what used to be this place where we are now?
Well, I think it's still the sea. It could have been
No.
the sea because you have been reclaiming a lot. The outline of the island is no longer what I knew.
I know that's a bit of a controversy. You see how he leads the discussion. Actually, I'm supposed to lead the discussion. Very, very challenging. I know where he's going, to a little island and territory. Amazing man. But we shan't go there. This used to be Raffles Institution.
Oh? Yeah,
The oldest school in Singapore used to be exactly where we are now. It's called Raffles Institution, Singapore's premier institution, built in 1823, 4 years after Singapore was founded in 1819 by Sir Stamford Raffles using his own money. And we tore it down.
Yes.
And on that very somber note, maybe we should start the discussion. I'd like to start by asking you for your views on something that is obviously very close to your heart and something that you're known for, which is leadership, right? And, you know, maybe the best way in which you demonstrated your leadership was in 1997, during the Asian currency crisis, where you stood out and stood firmly against the global trend and against IMF, for example, you know. And that sort of tenacity is something we don't find very much these days. And last September in Kuala Lumpur, you said, about leadership, you said, "When necessary, I will be nasty. That's my reputation. Leaders need to be criticized during my time. I was not only criticized, but also challenged."
Right.
You really said this.
Yeah.
And during the currency crisis in 97, you went against the grain and imposed currency control measures to manage the volatility of the Malaysian ringgit. And IMF and many other economists around the world, and even in your own country, economists were saying that it's not going to work. Many said that it was harebrained, but you still stood firm. And in the end, the then IMF MD, Michael Camdesis, admitted, and he said, Malaysia was correct in asserting that it did not need an IMF package to get it through the crisis. Could you share with us what exactly went through your mind when you stood firm? Was it stubbornness?
No. When somebody gives you advice, you have to study the advice that is given, whether it is for his good or your good. And when the IMF gave me this whole list of things that I have to do in order to recover, I studied it very carefully. It took me almost 1.5 years to study these few pieces of advice. And I tried to find something positive about those advice given to me to help Malaysia recover. And I found that it will make things worse. That's why I rejected it. It was a very frightening moment to go against practically the whole world. But really, if you follow the advice of the IMF and the World Bank, you're going to make things worse. And because of that, I had to spend time studying very carefully, reading books, asking people, having committee meetings and things like that, before I decided that, yes, the advice was no good, and therefore I have to do something else. I had to study banking, for example, about which I know nothing. I'm a doctor of medicine. What do I know about banking, about finance? But I was forced to, and in the end, of course, we decided that we'll do it our own way. And that's what we did.
And you proved that Malaysia boleh.
Yeah, Malaysia boleh, but it wasn't all that easy, because when you take a decision to do something that is odd, that is non-conventional, there's bound to be a lot of repercussion. You have to think forward as to how do you deal with the things that can happen. They said that the currency will just collapse completely. So what do you do to prevent that happening? There would be a lot of problem with the banks. How do you deal with the bank? And a whole number of things were thought up and anticipated. We set up small committees to look into all these areas, and fortunately they managed to counter the possibility of things going wrong because of the decision.
And it'll never be a perfect solution, and you were aware of that.
Yeah, and there is no such thing as a perfect decision or a perfect solution.
Yeah.
Every solution brings with it a lot of, unforeseen things.
Yeah. You know, when I was reading your accounts and what was really going on at that point, what came to my mind is, one of the things I do is I coach and consult CEOs on crisis management. And if I can be very frank, one of the challenges that CEOs face today is they listen too much to lawyers.
They listen?
Yeah, and somehow lawyers in organizations seem to make decisions about what is the right thing to do. Because you naturally consult a lawyer because there's a lot of culpability issues, right? So the CEOs consult the lawyers, they consult the subject matter specialists at an operational level, and they then say, and lawyers generally are paid to say, no, don't do it, right? So as a result, the CEOs, in my view, sometimes abdicate their responsibility to do the right thing and just go by what the lawyers advise them. Now, that's quite similar to the situation you faced. You are not a subject matter expert, but the decision, the responsibility of making the decision and to be accountable for that decision was yours. So you consulted people, and I'm sure there were economists and subject matter specialists who advised you against it, against what you want to do. But in the end, you made your own decision. That's leadership, not management. And to a large extent, I would say that that brand of leadership seems to be missing quite a bit in the world today. A crisis of leadership, some say. What's your view on that?
Well, I'm quite sure there are lots of people who have the capacity but are not given the chance to become leaders. They want to be safe. Politics is very dirty, and lots of people don't want to be criticized, so they stay away from politics. But they are capable leaders. So we get people who are not so capable to lead countries, unfortunately.
I'm tempted to ask you which countries, but I dare not. That will amount to sometimes scoring your own goal. But we shan't go there. But what were the key lessons as a leader that you learned? I mean, 97, 98 was probably one of the most significant